Jacob's Well tragedy. On November 23, 1983, two students from Texas State University, Richard and Clark, set out on a daring dive into Jacob's Well, an infamous underwater cave system in Texas. At first glance, the well appears to be a relatively shallow 25-foot deep hole, tempting many to attempt to touch the bottom before resurfacing. However, this illusion masks the deadly reality beneath. A series of underwater chambers, each more treacherous than the last. The first two chambers of Jacob's Well are relatively open and navigable, but the third chamber presents a perilous challenge, a tight squeeze leading to a 10-foot tall room. At its farthest edge lies a tiny tunnel, only 2 feet in diameter, too small for a diver to pass through. This very tunnel had claimed lives before. 2 years earlier, 2 divers tragically perished when a sudden rock slide filled with gravel trapped them inside. Despite these dangers, Richard and Clark, both experienced in open water diving but not in cave diving, decided to explore Jacob's Well. Their instructor, Don, a highly skilled diver, had personally retrieved the bodies of the 2 previous victims. He frequently warned against the well's dangers and had even attempted to seal off the entrance to the 4th chamber with cement. However, determined divers removed the blockage, leaving a haunting message. "You can't keep us out." Don himself had barely survived an encounter with the well. While attempting to explore the 4th chamber, a gravel slide trapped him inside. As his air ran out and water filled his lungs, he nearly succumbed to the cave's deadly grasp. In a desperate bid for survival, he fought against the debris and managed to escape. By the time he reached the surface, his body had suffered severe trauma. His stomach had completely ruptured due to rapid air expansion, leaving him screaming in agony. Richard and Clark, fascinated by these stories, decided to see the well for themselves. Despite their lack of cave diving experience, they ventured into the depths on November 23, 1983. They navigated through the first 2 chambers with ease and reached the 3rd chamber, where the infamous small tunnel awaited them. Richard made the first move, removing his oxygen tank to squeeze through the tight passage. However, as Clark attempted to follow, he saw Richard's face contorted in panic. His tank was missing, and he was suffocating. In a desperate act, Clark passed him a regulator, allowing him to breathe. They took turns sharing the regulator, struggling to escape the claustrophobic chamber. Just as they thought they were free, a chilling sound echoed through the water, a metallic clank. Their oxygen tanks had struck a wall, signaling 2 terrifying realizations. They were going the wrong way, and their air supply was critically low. Disoriented, they had mistakenly entered the false chimney, a deceptive tunnel that appears to lead to the surface, but is actually a dead end. Clark, summoning every ounce of strength, swam an astonishing 75 feet in a single breath, breaking through to the surface and gasping for air. Richard was not as fortunate. He remained trapped below, unable to escape the cave's grasp. By the time help arrived, it was too late. His lifeless body was recovered, another victim of Jacob's Well. Don, the very instructor who had tried so hard to keep divers away, was among those who retrieved Richard's body. He was devastated but unsurprised. The well had claimed yet another life, a tragic testament to its deadly nature. The Nutty Putty Cave incident. On November 24, 2009, 26-year-old John Edward Jones embarked on a caving adventure with family and friends into Nutty Putty Cave, a notoriously tight and treacherous underground system near Salt Lake City, Utah. Although John was an experienced caver, this was his first time in Nutty Putty Cave, a site known for its incredibly narrow passageways and dangerous squeezes. The cave had been temporarily closed after previous incidents where cavers had gotten trapped, but it had recently reopened under a permit-only system. John, along with his brother Josh and several others, entered the cave with excitement, planning to explore its complex network of tunnels. The main sections of the cave were beginner-friendly, with spacious chambers and accessible routes. However, John and Josh soon grew bored and sought out more challenging passages. They decided to navigate toward a passage known as the Birth Canal, one of the cave's tightest squeezes. This passage was infamous for forcing cavers into uncomfortable, contorted positions as they wiggled through, but after its tightest point, it opened up into a larger chamber where cavers could turn around. Confident in his ability, John attempted to navigate what he believed to be the Birth Canal, but in a tragic twist, he had mistakenly entered an uncharted section of the cave. As he pushed forward, he found himself in a passage that became increasingly narrower. Soon, he was positioned head down at a steep angle, unable to turn around. Realizing his mistake, John attempted to back out, but the slippery rock walls offered no leverage. His arms were pinned, his breathing became labored, and gravity forced his body deeper into the crevice. He was stuck. Josh, who had been nearby, quickly realized his brother's predicament and attempted to pull him out by his legs. But with John wedged in a passage just 18 inches wide and 10 inches high, escape was impossible. Recognizing the severity of the situation, Josh exited the cave to call for help, while John struggled to remain calm in the confined space. Rescue teams arrived 3 hours later, but the situation was dire. John was stuck in an extremely tight, near-vertical position, with the cave walls compressing his chest and making it increasingly difficult for him to breathe. Rescuers worked tirelessly, first attempting to pull him out with a rope. When this failed, they devised a pulley system similar to one used in a previous rescue, which had successfully freed another trapped caver years before. As the night wore on, John's condition worsened. Gravity forced blood to pool in his head, causing swelling and intense pain. His breathing grew shallower, and he became disoriented. At one point, a rescuer managed to reach him and provided water through a tube, giving John a brief moment of relief. His family was also allowed to speak with him, offering words of encouragement. By early morning, the pulley system was finally in place, and rescuers began carefully pulling John upward. However, as the team attempted to lift him, a crucial support bolt in the rock broke loose, sending the entire pulley system crashing down. One rescuer suffered injuries, and John slid even deeper into the narrow crevice. At this point, John's situation became critical. He had been trapped for over 24 hours, with his body under extreme stress. The oxygen levels in the cave were dropping, and his responses to rescuers grew weaker. Around 11:56 p.m. on November 25th, John was declared deceased. With no feasible way to recover his body without significant risk to rescue teams, authorities made the heartbreaking decision to seal the cave permanently. John's body remains inside Nutty Putty Cave to this day, entombed within the very passage that claimed his life. A memorial plaque now stands at the cave's entrance, honoring his memory and serving as a reminder of the cave's dangers. Zacatón Sinkhole incident. In an attempt to push the boundaries of deep diving, renowned cave diver Sheck Exley embarked on a daring expedition to explore the depths of the Zacatón Sinkhole in Mexico, one of the world's deepest water-filled sinkholes, measuring over 1,000 feet deep. Exley's fascination with diving started at a young age, encouraged by friendly competitions with his brother to see who could dive the deepest. Tragically, one of these childhood competitions ended in disaster when his brother lost consciousness at around 50 feet and drowned. Despite this heartbreaking loss, Exley continued to refine his diving skills, becoming one of the most respected figures in extreme deep diving. For reference, most divers are advised to stay above 150 feet, with 300 feet being considered the extreme limit even for highly trained individuals. However, Exley was not an average diver. Accompanied by fellow diving expert Jim Bowden, he meticulously prepared for what would be a historic record-breaking descent. The event even attracted media attention, eager to witness the attempt firsthand. As they began their descent into Zacatón, the two divers exchanged words of encouragement, but their missions were independent. Exley had spent years conditioning himself for extreme depths, learning to handle the physiological and mental challenges that came with them. However, during an earlier training dive at Bushman's Hole in South Africa, he experienced troubling symptoms: hallucinations, tremors, and confusion, all indicators of high-pressure nervous syndrome (MS). This dangerous condition, triggered by the immense pressures of deep diving, affects the nervous system and can cause severe disorientation. To counter these risks, Exley and Bowden planned a slow, methodical descent, switching air tanks at designated depths. Initially, everything went according to plan. However, at around 800 feet, Bowden began experiencing slight tremors, an early warning sign of HBNS. Then, at 900 feet, another issue emerged. His air supply had depleted faster than expected, leaving him with dangerously low pressure. With no choice but to surface immediately, he carefully initiated his ascent, fully aware of the life-threatening risks involved. Meanwhile, Exley faced an even graver situation. At 880 feet, his vision blurred, and his body convulsed uncontrollably. The combination of ACE and nitrogen narcosis, often likened to severe intoxication, impacted his ability to think clearly. In a desperate move, He wrapped his descent line around his arms for stability. But his increasing distress caused rapid breathing, depleting his air supply at an alarming rate. A desperate attempt to switch tanks only complicated matters further. As Bowden ascended, he noticed that Exley's descent line still extended downward, with unused tanks attached. Though concerned, he assumed Exley had successfully reached the bottom and was making his way back up slowly. However, the support team at the surface grew uneasy. They saw bubbles rising, but only from one diver. Alarmed, a support diver scribbled a message on an underwater slate. "Where's Sheck?" To investigate, a team member descended to 280 feet, where they made a chilling discovery: two small white squares hanging from Exley's descent line. Upon closer inspection, they realized these were pages from Exley's carefully planned dive logs. The meaning was devastating. Exley was trapped somewhere deep below. Nearly 10 hours after their descent, Bowden miraculously surfaced, having survived the perilous journey. Exley, however, never returned. 3 days later, a recovery team retrieved his descent line, bringing his lifeless body back to the surface. Despite the tragedy, Bowden had unknowingly set a record that day, reaching an astounding depth of 915 feet, the deepest dive ever achieved with open-circuit scuba equipment. But the triumph was overshadowed by the somber loss of a pioneering diver whose expertise and daring spirit had forever shaped the world of deep cave exploration.